Welcome to A Fine Time, The Nanny Revisited. This is a podcast about The Nanny, where we recap each episode and then discuss, sharing our own unique take on each episode. I'm Bernadette.
And I'm Debbie. Today, we're talking about episode 20, Ode to Barbra Joan. As usual, we're going to start with a brief summary of the episode. Cece's father calls, and despite her best pantomime, Niles hands her the phone to speak to him. Turns out he's in town, but Cece doesn't want to see him since last year they shared dinner and a cab. Fran encourages Cece to invite her father to dinner, volunteering Niles to make something special. Cece reconsiders because she wants her father to meet the man in her life. Anyway, Maxwell says, by all means, bring him along. At dinner, Stuart Babcock charms the family and Cece feels left out. Stu lets slip that he has to make an appearance at the Streisand concert, and Fran fangirls with the best of them, rattling off Barbra facts and describing the depths of her obsession. Stu invites her to the concert, and Fran's nervous system simply can't take the multiple shocks, going to the concert, front row tickets, and going backstage. When Stu takes Fran shopping, Cece's jealousy becomes apparent, even though she won't come out and say what she's feeling. Meanwhile, Maxwell has promised to take Brighton to a Mets game, but ends up double booked when the Theater Guild asks him to speak at the Broadway Symposium. Brighton tells Maxwell it's no big deal, they'll go to another game, and Fran butts in explaining how children never say what they really mean. Fran realizes that she can't go to the concert because Cece wants to go with her father, even though she hasn't said so. Cece locks herself in the bathroom, forcing Sylvia to use her nail so Fran can mend the Babcock family, sending Cece to the concert in Fran's Bob Mackie gown. Maxwell copies Fran's selfless example and cancels his theater lecture, only to learn that Brighton has made other plans. At the end of the concert, Stu arranges for Barbra to say hello to Fran and her mother. That's what I have. Do you have anything you want to add at this point, Bernadette?
No, I think that was a good summary.
Great. And that was actually more than 300 words because I ad-libbed some of it. So Thank you all for your patience. And my loquaciousness just went away with me. Would you like to take us to scene one?
Yes. So we open up in Maxwell's office, and Fran is acting like an announcer. She's even adding her own special effects by making an echo. Currently in the office, Maxwell's at his desk. Cece's on the couch. But Fran is making an announcement, and Brighton comes in with his little Mets uniform on, and he kind of like comes in on his knees. And it turns out Brighton's playing baseball. The coach, though, has told him he needs to work on his catching and his spitting. And right, of course, as he's about to spit, Niles interferes and is like, no.
Yeah. Understandably, too.
Oh, yes.
Spitting inside is not polite.
Exactly. And so, again, it turns out that, Brighton's playing baseball. Fran holds up. She goes, is this your athletic supporter you chose? So basically, the jockstrap is huge, and they quip that it could fit Mr. Ed, and Maxwell's like, well, he's a Sheffield. He'll grow into it.
Yup.
Yeah. And, I mean, because it's very large when Fran holds it up.
Did you catch what Fran's reaction to that was?
Well, it was kind of like she gave kind of eyes to it, but I don't recall if she said something. Did she say anything specifically?
She did say something, and I didn't catch it, but I think she makes it kind of like, ooh, did someone turn the heat up in here?
Oh, yeah, you're right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So a little innuendo.
Correct, which would have gone right over our heads were we watching this in the 1990s.
So Niles announces that on line 3, it's Cece's father, and he admires that he has guts to admit it. Cece does not want to talk on the phone. She even mouths to Niles, "Tell him I'm not here." To which, of course, Niles says, "She's right here."
Yep.
And so Cece takes the phone, and it's a very short conversation. She says, "Hello, father. How nice. Goodbye."
Exactly.
Of course, Fran remarks, another Hallmark moment.
Yeah.
And Cece explains, well, we already had dinner last year. We even shared a cab. It turns out he's the complete opposite of her. So that, of course, makes Fran and Niles want to meet him.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so again, Cece's reluctant to spend time with her father, but Fran, being Fran, um, says, my mom always says, and I didn't catch all the different things that Maxwell and
I did.
Niles attribute. Okay, if you want to say those.
I think it goes Niles, Maxwell, Niles.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay. So you can freeze anything is one. The second one is why buy sweet and low if restaurants are just giving it away?
Yeah.
Which, to be fair, is an interesting point. And then 7 cans of tuna fish count as one in the express lane.
Yeah.
But also an interesting perspective.
No. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Fran's like, no. It's, blood is thicker than water. But I didn't catch the second part of that.
And
quote.
You can wash both off of plastic slip covers.
Ah, okay.
Which brings us back to the couch in Fran's parents' apartment.
Yes. So essentially, she's saying you have to make time for family.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll find out that is kind of the theme of this week's episode.
Yes.
And so, again, she says, okay, why don't you invite him over here? Niles can make up something nice. And Cece starts to perk up a little, and she's like, oh, yeah, I can show him the man in my life. And Maxwell, again, I think kind of unknowingly cuts her down by saying, by all means, invite him.
Yeah, I don't think he's just totally oblivious because
I think so. Because he does not say it with any type of
malice.
Derision, malice, exactly. Whereas Niles is like, well, I'll blow him up and put him in his usual chair.
Correct.
And did you notice that at the end of that scene, Cece picks up a bat, which I'm presuming is Brighton's, and kind of mock hits after Niles as he's leaving?
Yeah, I didn't see exactly what it was, but I saw her grab something as if she's going to go bludgeon him.
Yeah, it was a bat.
That actually makes a lot of sense considering the baseball theme that was introduced in this scene.
Yeah. So yeah, was there anything you wanted to add?
No, I mean you also hit on all of the points I wanted to make. I'll just throw out that, as you pointed out, when Brighton comes into the room, Fran is making a big deal with the echo, and they do the wave, and she and Maxwell are really enthusiastic, and then they get to Cece, who doesn't even get up. She just kind of lifts her arm from her elbow down.
Half-hearted, pathetic little wave.
Yeah, she does not care, which she doesn't. She doesn't want to participate, clearly. That was the only thing I think I wanted to add.
So take us to the kitchen.
All right. So in scene 2, it's the night. Mr. Babcock is coming for dinner, and we find Niles and Fran in the kitchen, and Niles is prepping, and Fran, is warned that if she puts her hands on one more crab puff or something?
Crab.
That she's going to be in big, big trouble. And poor Niles, this is the start in this episode of Niles having really bad corns on his feet. Mm-hmm. And, Fran assumes that that's why he's being grumpy towards her. And it's like, oh, are they acting up again? He's like, they're excruciating, inflamed, throbbing pustules begging to burst. And Fran says, well, it's a good thing you're not making wine, which is true because traditionally wine would be made by people stomping on grapes. And it's not a fun image to imagine Niles doing that with his excruciating, inflamed, throbbing pustules. So anyway, everything seems fine. And then Cece rushes in, to complain about the china pattern on the plate because it's hideous and everything has to be perfect for her dad. And Niles says, that's not the pattern, that's your reflection.
Yeah.
And Cece is clearly very tightly wound, and she tries to explain that her father is demanding, critical, judgmental. You have no idea what it's like to be around someone like that. And Niles and Fran are like, yeah, okay. So Maxwell makes the mistake of coming into the room, and he also gets Cece's anxiety, stress I don't know what her nerves, I guess. He's wearing a tie with planes on it. Daddy's a Navy man. Don't you have anything with boats? And she decides to just go and solve it herself and go up to Maxwell's room to go through his drawers. And as is it Niles says, she'll do anything to get into his drawers.
Any excuse to get in his drawers.
Yeah. Which is also kind of interesting because we don't usually see her going to Maxwell's bedroom. We don't necessarily know if she knows which bedroom is his, which I'm going to make a note to come back to later. Anyway, so, Brighton comes in after his baseball practice. He needs his Gatorade and he plays. And, the question is, where are your grass stains? And, well, you don't get grass stains, on the bench is what Maggie says. And it's kind of nice to see her get a snide comment in on her brother like that, considering he's full of them about her. But anyway, it turns out that Brighton plays right field, which is also the position Fran played, and they both kind of realized, oh, I guess we were not good at baseball. And so Maxwell offers to take Brighton to opening day at Shea Stadium, and they make a plan to do that. The one thing I want to add that isn't necessarily in this scene, but tying back to the episode, The Family Plumbing, where Brighton and Tiffany are interacting, one of the first things they're talking about is which baseball teams they cheer for. And he's a Mets fan, and Brighton is a Mets fan, so that at least is consistent, which I appreciated. Is there anything you want to add to that scene?
No.
All right. Would you like to take us? I'll let you do the living room and the dining room. Okay. They kind of go together.
Yeah, some of the scenes in this episode are not very clear cut. So yeah,
or they're very, super short. Yeah,
exactly. So we are now back in the living room. There's a knock at the door. It's Cece's father, and Maggie's standing in front of the door, and Cece's kind of standing off to the side. And so Cece's dad starts talking to Maggie, going like, "Oh wow, you haven't grown, aged at all or grown at all." And Cece's like, "No, with like I'm
Daddy,
Cece.
Daddy, yeah. I'm over here."
Yeah, and her dad notes she doesn't have she doesn't have humor like her mother.
She has her mother's sense of humor.
Exactly.
None.
So yeah. Because he was totally teasing. So then we move to the dining room, and we are coming in the middle of a story. Obviously, that's been told. Everybody's laughing, having a great time. Cece's father's first name is Stuart, and they're talking to him, and Fran's telling a story about at the time someone was on Let's Make a Deal, one of her family members, and everybody knew that it was door number 1. I don't know. And of course they picked the wrong door. And everybody's kind of enjoying this conversation, laughing. And so you can tell Cece's trying to get in there as well. And she's like, well, one time Ivana and I were down somewhere, I think like in Florida or something.
At Mar-a-Lago.
Okay. And we were dripping wet with no towels. And everybody just kind of like, she thinks this is an embarrassing story because that's what they were kind of talking about. And no one's laughing. Nobody's really giving her a reaction. So she proceeds to tell, and the gardener saw us. And again, nobody's really reacting to her story.
Yeah, they're awkward smiles.
Yes. And then she's like, well, did I tell you about the time I bought Picasso? And I think it's Niles says not since the salad.
Correct.
And meanwhile, like Niles, as he's going around pouring drinks and stuff, in the background is groaning, like he's in obvious pain.
Yes. And after, because Cece says, did I mention I bought a Picasso? And Niles says, not since the salad. And she was holding the salt shaker at the time. She basically threw it down onto his foot.
Oh, okay. I missed that part.
That's why he at some point shrieked or shouts in pain.
Okay. I thought it was just being on his feet for so long, but okay, that makes sense.
No, Cece was being violent. And it's not the first time.
Not surprising. Not surprising. So Stuart mentions that he has a Streisand thing, and Fran immediately flips out. You mean uh Barbara? Is it Ann Joan? I don't know.
I didn't even try to record it
Yeah.
by virtue of the fact that she was
Basically,
just like rattling things off so fast.
exactly. Rattling off all of Barbara Streisand's information, born April 24th, 1942, lists her parents' name and the address.
Mm-hmm.
She's apparently seen her movies like 25 times each, spent $200 for chewing gum that was stuck underneath someone's shoe.
Barbara's shoe, the sour ball spit out by Elliot Gould, who was married to her at the time. And you missed the
Maxwell asks, "Oh, is that what is framed?" And she says, "No, that's the one that was spit out by Elliot Gould."
Yeah. But you missed the one where she said, because Stu makes the mistake of asking, "I take it you're a fan," and she says, "Well, if you call turning your bedroom into a shrine and then listing all of the other things you've already identified, like she is super fan."
Yeah. And but but Cece's kind of like, well, so what is, you're gonna have to explain plots. Is that the word?
Yeah, you must be plotsing, is what Fran says, and Cece says, "We're Babcocks, we don't plots."
Yeah, and Cece kind of mentions that she's not a big fan of hers, and Fran's like, an entire acre at an obviously Jewish cemetery just turned over.
Mm-hmm.
And Cece goes, "Well, her voice is so nasal." And Fran kind of like, "Well, that's part of her charm."
Of course, Fran says that.
Well, yeah, and it's an obvious how it's delivered is that it's also implied, like that's part of Fran's charm as well.
Exactly.
So, basically, Stuart's like, "Oh, Cece, I didn't realize you didn't like her. Well, Fran, would you like to go with me?" And Fran falls out of her chair, like to the side. And then Stuart's like, "Yeah, and the tickets are in the front row." And she falls over again. And Brighton notes, "Oh, did you guys see her eyes roll in the back of her head? That was pretty neat."
Yeah.
And Niles is like, "Might I suggest a safety belt for the concert?"
Yeah.
And then Stuart kind of mentions, "Okay, you might want to, someone might need to look out for, like, because he has more to tell her." So Niles gets behind her. Maxwell's kind of to the side in case she falls over again. And he says, Stuart says, "We get to go backstage." And she's like, "I'm fine." She stays upright, but obviously thrilled. And Cece, meanwhile, is Stuart's like, "That's okay with you, Cece?" He's like, "Of course," but she has bent a spoon. She's obviously not fine with it.
Correct.
And then just a little bit later, Fran, after of course everybody has stopped hovering around her to ensure she doesn't fall over, she falls over.
Yep.
And Maxwell notes, "Poor thing, she held on as long as she could."
Exactly. Yeah, the one thing I want to add to your summary of that scene is that in the conversation between Stu and Cece, etc., I think Stu asks Cece something like, "Well, is it okay?" Something like, since she makes a comment, "Since you hate her so much," and Maggie says, "Is he talking about Barbara or Fran?"
Yeah.
Which, I mean, the kids are really perceptive when it comes to Cece hating Fran.
Yeah. But it'll be interesting later in the later scene. But yes, you're right.
Yes.
Do you want to take us to the office?
I'd be delighted to. So basically, Maxwell's in the office. He's just hung up the phone. He's really excited because he was invited by the Theater Guild to talk at the Broadway Symposium. And so he needs his suit or whatever pressed by Saturday. And Niles points out, "So that with your baseball glove?" "Oh no." "Oh yes, that's the day he planned to take Brighton to see the Mets play." And Cece comes in complaining that her father's missing. And she's told, oh, he's not missing. He's out shopping with Miss Fine. Cece thinks, oh, no, that's worse. And it's clear she's jealous at this point, right? Mm-hmm. And the explanation she gives is that that Fran is taking time away from his work, and time is money. And Niles chimes in, and his money will one day be your money. Mm-hmm. And so that's what she's claiming to be upset about. But it's really that Stu's spending time with Fran. Mm-hmm. So
yeah,
I think that's it. Do you want to add anything to that scene?
No, it's a relatively short scene again. Yeah. So yeah.
Do you want to take us into the living room in scene 6?
Yes. So Fran and Stu come back from their shopping trip, and Fran's noting how the dress will be fabulous. It's in a dress bag, so we don't see it right away. There's also a lot of other packages, parcels from their shopping trip. Mm-hmm. It's Bob Mackie dress. And, she's thanking him, but she, feels bad. But he's like, oh, I love spoiling you. And as he leaves, he says, goodbye, kitten. And then Fran kind of like to herself is like, kitten.
Yeah. But before you migrate onto the next part of the scene, can I just chime in with a couple things on Stu's interaction with Fran? Just because this is a longer scene, I think it makes sense to.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Go for it.
So, when they walk in, Fran makes this comment, "Aw, Stu, you're like a fairy godfather. All I said was that I was in the mood for a Big Mac, and you bought me a Bob Mackie." Those are very different things. Mm-hmm. And then, as you pointed out, he says, "Please don't mention it. I love spoiling you." And so Fran says, "Oh, well, if it gives you pleasure, I saw a pair of shoes at Bergdorf's that would make you ecstatic." Mm-hmm. And then as he's leaving, he asks her, "Have you told anyone that you're going to see Streisand?" And Fran says, "Just my mother, and she'll take care of the greater tri-state area."
Yeah.
Which I liked. So, okay, go ahead, continue. Who comes into the scene next?
Niles. And again, he's struggling. His feet really hurt. But he takes note of all the parcels, and he's like, oh, it's like your Cinderella, except you have an evil stepdaughter. Mm-hmm. And
then Cece comes in?
Yeah. And I'm trying to decipher my notes here. I have swallows.
Yeah, so I'm not gonna lie, this was a list of references that there were a couple of references that I wasn't really sure about in this episode. So sorry, listeners, if you know who some of the references that we missed are, please email or tweet us. Yes. Yeah, so Cece comes in. Where the hell are they? I can't believe they're not back yet. Who? Says Fran. The swallows. Kev Estrada. Look into it, Niles.
Uh-huh. Okay, yes. But again, Cece comes down, takes note of everything, and Niles can't help himself because he's teasing Cece, and it's like, well, if they get married, meaning Fran and Stu, Miss Fine will be your stepmother.
Will be your new mummy.
Yes, and Cece collapses.
She
like
faints.
Totally, yeah. I don't know if you counted this next little bit as part of the scene or a separate.
Yes, I counted it as part of the scene.
Okay, because basically you kind of this screen has gone white, and you can kind of hear in the background like Niall saying, "Oh no, lipstick's gonna get all over the couch." Yep. And you're like, okay, we need to try to wake her up. Get Brighton sneakers, and she immediately opens her eyes, and Brighton's kind of like, oh, that got her. Yep. That got her attention.
And Niall says, something like,
yeah, disappointed. Oh no, right when I was about to slap her.
Exactly.
Yeah. So.
And did you catch what Fran said next?
Well, she kind of teased again by going along with the whole stepmother thing.
Exactly.
Where now I don't have what she specifically said.
She said, "Don't tease my daughter."
Oh yeah.
And then
she has a look on her face.
Yes, and then she says, "Say, in the will, doesn't the daughter come after the wife?" Mm-hmm. And well, needless to say, that's enough for Cece to sit up and say, "I'd be more concerned that the daughter would come after the nanny."
Yep. Yeah. So, but what's interesting too is the scene where, um, Cece's on the couch at first, having passed out. You
Hmm.
see close-ups of like Fran's face and Niall's face and Brighton when he comes in. So
Hmm.
it's shot a little differently than normal.
Yeah, it's not a very flattering angle for anyone.
Well, no.
So,
But it's as if the camera was from the perspective of Cece.
correct. Yeah.
So anyway, uh, Maxwell comes in and informs Brighton. He starts going on this whole spiel about,
Well,
oh,
before he does that, Maxwell asks Brighton, "Do you have a moment, son?" He's like, "Am I in trouble?" And Maxwell says, "No, I rather think I am." And Brighton says, "Yeah, I've got time for this."
yeah, yeah. And so he's trying to say, he can't take Brighton to the game, and Brighton is like, no problem. And like very much like oh, that's fine. Like he does not seem upset or like as if he's trying to cover up or anything like that. He's like, no problem. And he keeps saying it because Maxwell has not heard this.
Correct.
Maxwell has obviously rehearsed in his head what he was going to say, and he's just going through with it. And Brighton's like, I told you it's not a problem.
Right.
Um, yeah, but I'm gonna let you kind of take over from here because it kind of transitions.
Yeah, that's fine. So as you put it, Maxwell just kind of kept talking, ignoring Brighton, saying it's not a big deal. And finally, Brighton says, "As I said, no problem." Like he shouts it, and Maxwell's like, "Oh, okay, thanks, son." And so Maxwell's leaving, head into his office, and Fran decides to butt in and says, "Can I talk to you for just 1 minute?" And Maxwell says, "I doubt it," which I find amusing. But anyway, so Fran follows Maxwell into the office to try to explain how Brighton's statement that it wasn't a big deal was not correct. And she says to him, "Mr. Sheffield, how can you not take him to the game? Can't you see you're breaking that little boy's heart?" And Max was like, "He said it was no problem. You must have heard him." And she said, "Of course that's what he said. That's what kids always say. They're not going to tell their father when they're dying inside." Meanwhile, so she continues speaking, which I will pick up from momentarily. But for those who've not watched this episode in uh, recently, you know, they're now in the office, and at the back of Maxwell's office are these really nice doors, which are glass, and we can see Cece out on the patio or in the backyard, however you want to describe it, on the terrace, whatever. And she starts basically acting out the things that Fran's about to say.
Mm-hmm.
So Fran says they give off signals. They act morose. And Cece drops her head and looks sad. Sometimes they have fits of anger, and Cece picks up a potted plant. The poor potted plant was just sitting there minding its own business, and she throws it on the ground, cracking its pot. And finally, if they're despondent enough, they might even be driven to acts of violence. And of course, poor Niles has walked out. And what does Cece do? She stomps angrily on one of his feet, and he shouts in pain.
Mm-hmm.
And Fran has noticed what is happening and says, "And that concludes today's audiovisual demonstration." And she walks away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what's funny is like before Niall or Cece stomps on Niall's foot, he had come out after she threw down the potted plant to start
Mm-hmm.
cleaning up. And there was some type of an exchange between them that we did not hear. Um, but yeah, so he's like trying to clean up, and then she just comes and stomps on his foot.
Right. The way I look at it is the conversation they had was totally immaterial. It was just she was angry enough that she stomped on his poor foot, which would have been very painful for him given his corns.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, do you want to take us to the upstairs bathroom, which I
Yes.
believe is the bathroom that cousin Irving fixed?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So Fran is getting ready, and her mother's there, and Fran's kind of sitting in front of the mirror in front of the makeup table, and she has two curlers, um, like at the temples, at her temples, and she says she looks like Barbara and Yentl.
Yep.
And her mother's saying, "Oh, this is the most exciting day, like getting you ready."
"Oh,
Um,
Fran, this is the most exciting moment of my life, dressing my daughter for Barbra Streisand."
and Fran's like, "Well, what about my wedding? And her mother goes, well, I've decided to live for today.
Correct.
And then I guess Fran is not as excited as, Sylvia would expect. And she's like, oh, did your excitement peaked too early? And Fran's like, oh, Ma, she's our leader. She's excited, but Fran has had this realization that Cece and her father are kind of like two trains in a tunnel, one the express and one the local train, going side by side but never meeting. And essentially, she's like, Cece should go with her father. And her mother is not having anything of it. She starts pulling out of her bag Barbra Quarterly,
which is a real thing.
Barbra.
Also a real thing.
And then a wig that apparently Fran used to wear all the time, including to her Uncle Harry's funeral, which she asks, kind of like as a second thought, like, oh, is that in poor taste? And her mother's like, no, he loved her too.
Exactly.
It's some type of Barbra Streisand wig.
Yes.
And this is all like, you can tell it's Sylvia's attempt to remind Fran how much she likes Barbra, and so that she should go.
Right.
And Fran's like, oh, but this is all your fault. You raised me too good. You always taught, that you should care about.
Wasn't it you who said family comes first?
Yeah. And then Sylvia says, our family, not theirs.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. So, anyway, do you want to add anything else to that scene?
No, I don't, but just as we're discussing, I'm making more notes for our future fun segment. So I'm a happy camper.
Yes. Okay. Take us then to the next scene.
So it's later that night, not too much later that night, and the doorbell rings, and poor Niles is trying desperately to get to the door, and he's limping and he's moving slowly and he's clearly in pain. And Maxwell walking by, like just walks by, doesn't get the door or anything, and points out, oh, someone's at the door. And Niles dryly says, and I thought another angel got its wings.
Mm-hmm.
And so he continues his trek, his long trek to the front door, and the doorbell rings a second time, and Niles has had it. He's not even at the door yet, and he just says, oh, just come in. And, Stu opens the door. Good evening, Niles. Oh, good evening, sir. I can't get you anything, can I? No, nothing. Maybe just a martini, extra dry. By the time you get it, it will be evaporated.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when Fran makes her entrance. And this is, again, one of those scenes where I feel like we need to talk about her fashion in the scene because it is relevant.
Yes.
She is clearly in the Bob Mackie gown that Stu bought for her. It's floor-length gown. By the way, Stu is in a tux. Like, that's how fancy this concert is. It's a floor-length gown. Would you call it like silver?
It looked white to me.
It's shimmery.
Yeah.
Like the color, it's not exactly clear. It has some silver on the bodice, and she has this big necklace around her neck, and her hair is up in an updo. And she has the long white gloves that go up to her, basically up to her shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, Stu tells her how great she looks, and she says thanks, but I can't go. Why not? I think you should take Cece, but I want to take you. Oh, okay. No. And she's clearly still struggling internally about whether she should go to the concert or whether Cece should go instead. And of course, Sylvia is not helping. From the upstairs bathroom, she's loudly singing Barbra songs. And, Fran basically tells Stu that, like, he really should take Cece, and, he needs to reach out to her. And he says, I've tried reaching out to Cece, but she pushes me away. And I don't exactly remember how it comes about, but, at some point they hug, and that's the exact moment that Cece walks in. And she gets very upset, and Stu points out that not only does Cece have her mother's sense of humor, which we've already established was none, but she also has her mother's timing.
Yeah. She actually does this huge, like, dramatic, Daddy!
Exactly.
And rushes off.
Yeah. Yeah, it's quite an ordeal.
Yeah.
Is there
Fran
anything
calls herself an old softie
she
whenever
does?
he's asking why. Yeah. But yeah.
Is there anything else you want to add to that scene?
No. If you're okay, I'll take us to the bathroom then.
By all means, go for it.
So Cece has locked herself in the bathroom, and we have like Fran, Stuart, Sylvia, Niles, all out in the hallway. I think Maxwell
And
or no,
Maxwell, yes.
they're all out in the hallway trying to kind of coax Cece to open the door, um, and uh, they're trying to figure out how to open the door because Cece's not going to unlock it, and
Right.
they send Niles to go get a kitchen knife, and he's slowly going that way. But then Fran's like, "Ma, use your nail."
Well,
Um,
just sorry.
mhm,
So Niles is told to get a butter knife, and you can tell he does not want to trek all the way down to the kitchen, which is understandable considering the pain he's been in. But he
mhm,
says, "Well, can't we just starve her out?"
mhm.
And
Yeah,
when that's rejected, then he does wander
yeah.
off. Go ahead.
But instead, Sylvia's going to use her nail, which apparently throughout Fran's life, Sylvia has been able to use her nail to open things. And Sylvia does open the door, and she notes kind of with, you know, acrylic.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, Fran had mentioned that her mother's nails can open anything: letters, diaries, my old boyfriend Chevy. I never had any privacy as a child.
mhm. And so at first Stuart's gonna go, but Cece does not want to talk to him, so Fran goes in and
She
she's like,
also
cover me.
throws something at him.
Yeah, yeah. And she's like, so Fran offers to go and she's like, cover me. And she goes in and Cece, is very upset. And at first she's like smoking as well, which Fran immediately takes the cigarette out of her hand and throws it into the trash can. It's like, not in my house. And Cece's like, this isn't your house. And kind of has a little tangent, and she even says, I loathe you.
Yeah.
And Fran goes, at least you're opening up.
So one thing that I think we should say that is really interesting about this scene is, earlier Niles was joking and teasing Cece that Fran might marry her father and become her stepmom, but here Fran is sort of playing the role of stepmom.
Oh yeah,
Like
just the way she's talking is very much as a parent. Like, we were worried about you. Like
right,
how she's talking sounds as if it were her mother.
right, like, in before they get into the bathroom, Fran says, "Cece, open this door. Your father and I are very concerned about you."
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so Fran's like, at least you're opening up. And then she goes to kind of, you need to stop pushing people away. And she reaches out and Cece kind of pushes her hand away. And she's like, oh, I was just trying to get some of the ash out of your hair.
Right.
And Cece kind of is like now pouting. And she's like, I'm so misunderstood. People think I'm self centered, cold hearted, a witch. And Fran kind of gives that ironic look at that time.
Yeah, because she has nothing to say to that.
Yeah, because that is how everybody does perceive Cece to be.
Understandably, because that is typically how she's acting.
Mm-hmm. Now, did you? We cut back to the hallway.
Right.
Did you?
So the timing is
Yeah.
is perfect because Fran is saved from having to answer what Cece said by Stu asking, "Is everything okay in there?"
Mm-hmm.
And then Sylvia says, "If they're like my Morty, they could be in there for hours."
Mm-hmm.
And Stu then says, "Fran was right. I should have spent more time with Cece when she was little." And Maxwell says, "Miss Fine has an annoying way of being right about these things."
Mm-hmm.
And then at that point, Sylvia makes an offer that somehow Stu was able to refuse. She says, "If you need another escort for the concert, this outfit goes from day to night with just a few accessories."
Mm-hmm.
And again, I feel like this is one of those outfits we should talk about briefly while it's relevant. Is she's sort of wearing, like, how would you even describe it? Like, I kind of think it's sort of Western. It's like a red top, and I think it's a black skirt, and then the back of the top has a bunch of sequins, like it's all sequins.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I yeah. I don't really have the know of a really good way because there's like a pattern to it. It's not like it's entirely like it's not a solid wall of sequins. There's a pattern to it.
Yeah, I would even say it was a pattern of sequins.
Mm-hmm. Almost kind of like a cowboy.
That's why to me it feels
like
Western. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an interesting outfit, which is not in the same league as the Bob Mackie dress.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Like the Bob Mackie dress is it's not my taste, but it is very classy and sophisticated.
Mm-hmm.
Sylvie's outfit is not.
Yes.
So anyway, yeah, so I think then we flip back into the bathroom. And you want to pick up where we left off?
Yeah, so now we're back in the bathroom and I keep saying Sylvia. It's Cece.
They're both blonde.
Sobs into Fran going, I don't know what to do. And Fran at this point is like, hello, calling next of kin. And so that's when Stu comes in, and so Cece's still clinging on to Fran, and Fran's kind of like trying to transfer her over to her dad, and he's like, here's your daddy. And Stu notes, oh, I haven't, I haven't really seen Cece cry. Well, except, the crash of 87.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so Cece's now in her father's arm, and Stu is like, oh, well, would you like to go with me? And she's like, really? Kind of, and he's like, yeah, and you're lucky to have a friend like Fran. And she goes, I know. She's wonderful. She's going to let me wear her dress. And she turns and looks at Fran. Because the entire time she says, I know she's wonderful, she's still clinging on to her dad. So we don't see her face. But after she says she's going to let me wear her dress, she like looks over as if she's perfectly fine. Kind of smiles.
Correct. Which makes it seem like she was sort of manipulating the situation a little bit.
Yeah. Because I know I was surprised when she so readily agreed with him that it's nice to have a friend like Fran. But yeah, I was like, maybe secretly, but no. Was there anything else you wanted to add to that?
No. I guess I say no, and then I'm like, let me add one more thing. But this entire scene, we see Fran sort of playing the role, like we said before, of being like stepmom to Cece, and very maternal. And like even when like we cut back into the bathroom, and Cece's crying and clinging to Fran, and it just felt very as if Fran was taking on that role. So
yeah.
So then I guess we're jumping to the one of the last few scenes. This is, I guess, the longest of the remaining scenes. And so we see Fran's back in her bathrobe, and she's shouting to them as they're going, don't forget my Barbra program and my Barbra t-shirt and my Barbra mug with the nose handle. And Sylvia, Fran closes the door, and Sylvia tries to comfort her. Darling, you did a good thing. An incredibly stupid thing. And Fran blames the forceps that were used in her birth, and Sylvia says, the pain you caused me, I would have let them use the jaws of life. And so Maxwell now appears, and he says that he's going to follow Fran's selfless example, and he goes and tells and Fran says, well, oh good, then you can be as happy as I am. And so
which is not very
exactly, like she's miserable. But so Maxwell goes to talk to Brighton to say, I canceled my lecture so I can take you to the ball game. And Brighton very like nonchalantly is like, bad news, Dad, I made other plans. And Maxwell's disappointed. And, Brighton says, don't be disappointed, Dad. I'll go with you to another ball game. The Mets aren't going anywhere. And Fran's like, that's for sure. But yeah.
But what's funny is that Maxwell kind of looks at Fran because this was Fran's doing.
It was.
And she goes, he did say no problem. So
Yeah.
she's like trying to get out of that.
Yeah, but it was her doing, as you put it. You know,
Mhm.
she butted in and said there's no way he could possibly mean what he said, but he did.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
do you want me to do
So
the next scene?
yeah, go for it.
So we're still in the living room, and Fran and her mother are sitting on the whatchamacallit, on the chair, the couch, and they have the phone between them, and they're listening to what sounds like the end of the concert, and it sort of flips back and forth between what's supposed to be the concert and them on the couch. And you know, Fran and her mother are talking, and Sylvia says, "I just love her," and Fran says, "I love her more." And Sylvia says, "I loved her first." And Fran says, "I'll love her last."
Mhm.
And then Fran's like, "Oh, Stu says he has a surprise for us." And then, we cut to the concert, and the woman playing Barbra Streisand takes the phone. "Hello, gorgeous." And it cuts
Mhm.
back to Fran and Sylvia, who are just shocked that they're talking on the phone to Barbra Streisand, their leader.
Mhm.
So,
And I thought it was interesting because we see that the concert's taking place at Madison Square Garden, but Cece and her dad are kind of standing on the wings of the stage.
mm-hmm.
Um, Again, so and I believe it's Cece who's holding the phone,
Yes, you're right.
and which is interesting. Um, and she seems happy to be there.
Well, she's getting to spend time with her dad. Of course she's happy.
Yeah. Um,
Nasal voice or not.
yeah, yeah. And so then the last little bit during the credits is Fran is in the living room and she's like, "Why do we always argue about who's the biggest fan?" And she starts singing, but it's with Chester.
Yup.
And she notes that she loves singing the songs with him.
And what I love Chester. I think he's adorable. But what's amusing is, as you put it, she says, like, "Why do we always argue over who loves her more? We should just, get back to singing." And so she puts the music back on, and Fran is singing, and Chester's barking along.
Mhm.
So he was in his own way also singing along.
Mhm.
So they were singing "The Way We Were."
Yeah. So before we get into our different shticks, I did want to just ask you,
Sure.
what did you make of the relationship between Stu and Fran? Because to me, it did feel a bit ambiguous on the part of Stu, just because there are every now and then just those little odd beats,
Where
like
he calls her
calling
kitten.
her kitten. Exactly. And Fran kind of as an after being like kitten. Um, like obviously nothing happened and there was never a moment where he like put a move on her or anything like that,
Right.
but it definitely made it seem like there could have been,
I know. Yeah,
so I was
no,
just curious your thoughts on that.
no, that's a great question. And it is something that I do ponder when I watch this episode, because, like, imagine well, how interesting or how different it would be if she started dating Cece's dad.
Hmm.
And heck, if she became Cece's stepmother, that would be hilarious.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
I'm sorry. I think this would be hilarious. It would be really bad for Cece and her sister Dee Dee. Um,
Hmm.
but, like, as we know already, Cece's parents are divorced. We know her mother is still alive. We also know Cece's not really that close with any of her family.
Hmm.
Um, so, like, it would be a very different story if Fran dated Stu. Um, like, I I don't know. I'm sort of torn. Like, I know how this ends, so, like, I'm happy with how it ends.
Hmm.
And by this I mean the series, and I won't say any more about what happens. But, like, it would be very different if she dated Stu Babcock at all.
Yeah,
Um,
but what do you think is Stu's perspective
Well,
in this episode?
no, that's a great question. I mean, it is sort of ambiguous, as you put it. I would think that Fran is young enough to be his daughter, so
Mhm.
there's a huge age gap there, because it's sort of established that she is younger than Cece. Um, so like that's a little weird if he was trying to date her. But the way Fran puts it is like he's a father looking for a daughter, she's a daughter looking for a father. Like,
Mhm.
it seems like he's just looking for a kid to have a relationship with. And by kid I mean full grown adult. But
Yeah.
I don't know, but I mean, as you point out, the kitten comment is weird to me. Like, I don't to me that's more flirtatious than
Mhm.
parental. What did you
Yeah.
think?
Yeah, that was the thing, is that I was nervous a little bit during the episode that it would be that he turned into like a sleaze, like made unwanted overtures or whatever, but he didn't. So I was glad that that didn't go that direction, because Fran is very obviously not coming from it in a romantic, you know, way. Um, at least I don't interpret hers as being romantic.
Mm-mm.
Um, but still, like, the fact that he is willing to spend so much money on someone he just met, and he does say, she's gorgeous when she comes down, like, I don't know. It could have, I'm glad it didn't go in that direction, is I guess ultimately what I'm saying. But I could see how it could have
Hmm.
gone in that direction.
As you
Um,
were talking, though, it sort of made me wonder, like, how did they end up going shopping together?
yeah, you're right. Yeah, because it didn't really say what prompted that.
Right, like that seems a little weird.
Hmm.
I'm not sure. I'm just not sure.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how that came
Yeah.
about.
And
Um,
that's the other thing too, is I'm kind of curious from Fran too, like how she felt accepting all of that, because that's a lot of, like, there's a lot of, you know, packages from when they went shopping, and
right.
the dress and everything. Like, I don't know if I wouldn't feel comfortable accepting that from someone I just met.
It is awkward. Um, Especially the gown, which must have cost a fortune.
Mhm.
So I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not sure it would be better if they were dating, though. Like, I still think that would
No.
be bad.
No, it was again just a kind of odd, interesting kind of dynamic between the two of them.
Right.
Because I wouldn't blink at all if he did the same for Cece as his daughter. Um,
Hmm.
Prior to that dinner, he had never met Fran.
Correct. But for the record, in that very very short scene where he, comes in and makes a joke about Maggie being Cece, Fran makes a comment, "Call me crazy, but I think I like him,"
Hmm.
like right
Yeah,
off the
they
bat.
hit it off. Yeah, but yeah. But anyway, that was just, I was kind of curious about your thoughts on that whole dynamic between the two.
It would have been very interesting had they dated. It would have been even more interesting had they gotten married and, you know, she became, Cece's stepmother. And what if she gave Cece a step sibling or a half sibling? Like,
Oh my gosh.
there's just so many things you could do with this.
Hmm.
Sorry. Anyway, I'll drop it now.
Okay. Was
Do
there
you want?
any other overarching thing you wanted to talk about before we went into our shticks?
One thing I'll say is that I liked how the episode paralleled, like kind of as you put it, the theme was family comes first here. Like, you need to make time for
Hmm.
family, and it was
Hmm.
nice that again you had these two storylines going at the same time.
Hmm.
Although
Yeah.
obviously the
Yeah.
DC one is more interesting than the Brighton one, but
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Should we get into some favorite fashion? Because since
I
we
would
were
love to.
kind of talking about the fashion,
I would love to. What did you think of Fran's concert attire? We've talked about it, but we haven't talked about what we thought about it.
I think I'm similar to you in that, again, it is classy or elegant and stuff. Not necessarily my favorite.
Mhm.
Um, it's a little difficult to describe just because, as you said, at times too, depending on the lighting, it almost seemed to appear a little velvety as well in certain parts of it, but
Mhm.
I don't know what the fabric was or anything like that. I don't think the bodice line was particularly flattering.
I didn't either, but I also sort of wondered if that was intentional,
Hmm.
like, because Cece does wear the dress later, and so, like,
Hmm.
to me, when Fran's in it, it just looks like it's a little too big,
Oh.
and Cece is, bigger than
Hmm.
Fran. Um, I yeah,
Yeah.
I just thought
So
it didn't fit Fran particularly well.
yeah.
Um, but then again, also it didn't really fit Cece that well either because there was the same problem when Cece wore it that it was like
Hmm.
it didn't it just didn't seem to fit properly
Hmm.
at the top.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so just a fun fact, according to an article by BuzzFeed, that dress was the same sequined Bob Mackie gown that Madonna actually wore in the 1991 Academy Awards.
Oh wow.
So
Interesting.
yeah, that I mean, that is one of the more iconic outfits from the show, and
Hmm.
it's one that I think she only wears it once, unlike some of the other outfits we've talked about previously that she wears
Hmm.
multiple times. Um, yeah, I was trying to see if I could figure out how much that dress cost, but so far, no luck. My guess is a lot.
Yeah, I agree. Especially if it was Madonna's.
Yeah. Um, yeah, that I think I'm glad we started with that outfit because it is show stopping. Um,
Hmm. And again, she has a very dramatic entrance with it coming down the curved
mhm.
stairwell.
She makes a lot of uh, dramatic entrances like that.
Hmm.
So we have a lot more of that to see as we
Yeah, that
continue.
does harken back to the first episode when she appears in that red dress
Correct.
coming down the staircase. Yeah.
And that was the original staircase on the original set that we never see again.
Yeah. On the opposite side. That's right.
Correct. Um, was there other fashion you want to talk about, or can I jump in with some others?
I was just going to note, so in the first scene when we're in Maxwell's office, I was not really a big fan of Fran's jacket that had like it was very colorful but had like things coming off of it.
We've seen that before.
Hmm. But I did kind of like Cece's purple blazer.
Yes. So I wanted to talk about Cece's purple blazer, and so I want to talk about Cece's fashion in this episode because she starts wearing brighter colors than I think we've seen her in before. Yes, we've seen her in red and blue, but like there's the purple jacket in scene one, and then at dinner she's wearing a fuchsia button-down shirt.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, which seems more like a Fran color.
Exactly. So it's sort of different, but it's also sort of nice to see her in these bright colors.
Hmm.
Um, yeah.
That was all I really had to say. So if you have other fashion bits, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to talk about Cece wearing brighter colors because we usually don't like. I mean, what she's wearing um, in the scene in the bathroom, like a black or navy jacket with white collar, like that's what we're used to seeing her in. But here she wore bright colors, and it's nice to see her wear something different.
Hmm. Yeah.
So that's all I had on fashion.
Okay. Should we go into notable New Yorkers?
Sure, I have a very long list.
Yeah.
Um,
There are a lot of references, and I don't feel like I caught like I didn't have time to write every single one down. I feel like so.
I tried to write them all down, but I didn't. There were some that I couldn't understand.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, so the first one I got was Mr. Ed.
Yep.
That's
Um,
the horse, right?
it's an American sitcom about a talking horse. Yes.
Yes. Um, I don't know if you count, Hallmark moment. I'm pretty sure everybody's familiar with Hallmark cards. Um, And let's see here. Olive oil
Yep.
from Popeye.
Yes. And according to Wikipedia, because that's where I thought the reference was from also, she apparently appeared in a cartoon 10 years before Popeye did.
Oh, really? I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know that.
According to Wikipedia.
Wow. Okay. Ivana, I'm assuming Trump.
Yep. Especially
Picasso.
considering the reference to Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah. Picasso.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously Barbara Streisand, who
Mm-hmm.
we've had references to in previous episodes, I believe.
We have.
Elliot Gould.
Yep.
Let's see here.
Who, as we know from the show, is married to Barbara.
Yeah. Okay, so here's where I got the Andrew Lloyd Webber, which
Yep.
again has been referenced before, but then there's a list after his name of other.
I only got the second one. So I got Andrew Lloyd Webber and Sondheim. And then
and there's a third or fourth as
there's
well.
a third one. And it sounded like Campion or something, but I couldn't catch it.
Yeah, I wasn't quick enough. But I'm assuming again all Broadway producers or
Andrew Lloyd Webber and Sondheim, yes. According to an article on BroadwayWorld.com, apparently Stephen Sondheim and Andrew Lloyd Webber share a birthday.
Oh, interesting. Like the same exact one or just the same date?
I believe the same day. I didn't dig further than the headline.
What are the odds that it's like the exact same birthday?
Exactly.
Yeah. It must have been a musical day.
Apparently.
Bob Mackie.
Yep.
Cinderella.
Yep.
Now you said swallows?
Yeah, so that part, so this is for those who aren't following us as quickly as we're jumping. This is when Cece is like, where the hell are they? Why aren't they back yet? Or something like that regarding her dad and Fran, and Fran's already there. And she's like, who? And so she says, the Swallows and Capistrano. So I tried to do some Googling, and so the Swallows and Capistrano, and I found, according to journeynorth.org, and I quote, every year around the day of San Juan, which is October 23rd, the famous cliff swallows of San Juan Capistrano swirl into the sky and head back to their wintering grounds in Argentina, 6,000 miles south. And they faithfully return every spring in mid-March, end quote.
Huh. Interesting.
But that seems like a very eclectic thing to, yeah. So
to just like on your feet say, like off
exactly.
The top of
so like I don't know what she was trying to get at, but that was the closest I could get.
Okay. Yeah. We also have the whenever Niall says, "Oh, I thought it was another angel got its wings." I'm assuming that's a reference again to "It's a Wonderful Life," which they previously had a reference to, I believe, in the Christmas episode.
Yes, with hitting the bell at the pawn shop.
Yeah. And then whenever Fran comes down in the dress, Stu says she looks like Audrey Hepburn, and she says, "Well, it's a shame I sound like Selma Diamond." Now, I know Audrey Hepburn, but did you look up Selma Diamond?
She was an actress, and that's about as far in as I got. Sorry.
Okay. Fair. Trying to see if there's anything else that I have.
While you do that, I'm going to toss in a couple.
Yeah, go for it.
Shea Stadium and the Mets. So the Mets is a baseball team. They play in New York. They used to play at Shea Stadium. They no longer play there. Then there was
Madison Square Garden.
Madison Square Garden, home of the New York Rangers. There are multiple Barbra Streisand references beyond just who she is, but there's the reference to Yentl, which is a film that starred her. And according to Wikipedia, it tells the story of an Ashkenazi Jewish girl who decides to dress and live like a boy so that she can study in the yeshiva after her father died. And the reference to that was where Fran had the two curlers on the sides of her ears, and that was a reference to peyot or payas, which are worn by some men and boys in the Orthodox Jewish community. So, yeah, throwing in some Yiddishkopf, even though we're still in our notable New Yorkers. I did search to see if the Barbara Quarterly was a real thing, and yes, it is. Didn't know that. Color Me Barbara, I think was a play on, according to Wikipedia also, Color Me Barbara was the 7th studio album that Streisand recorded in 1966 with Columbia Records. And so that was probably some sort of promotional material for that record. On a Clear Day is a song. And then, of course, Sylvia was singing from memories when she's shout singing from upstairs memories, like the corners of my mind, misty watercolored memories, the way we were. So actually, I think the song is The Way We Were. And then there's also quoting People Who Need People, or Ask You'll See the Show is what Fran says. And I think that's all I had.
Yeah. As you said, there's a ton of different Barbra Streisand references throughout.
Correct.
Yeah. I think that's it for notable New Yorkers. So
all right. So I guess we're up to Yiddishkopf. Yes. I'm gonna again complain about the crab puffs. The crab is not kosher. For seafood, it needs to have fins and scales. Crabs are basically sea bugs, so they are not kosher. One of my friends commented that, well, of course we don't eat like people who keep kosher don't eat bugs and crabs and lobsters and all those things. They're basically sea bugs, so it makes sense you wouldn't eat them too. And I was like, yes, they're sea bugs. As you mentioned, the word platzing came up. It's basically bursting with emotion. It can either be a positive or a negative thing. It could also be used to literally mean you're bursting. Like if you're your hot water bottle platzed, it would burst, which would be bad. And then Fran also uses the word genug, which is a word we've heard before, which is basically stop, put a cork in it, be quiet. Like that's how she uses it to talk to her mother when her mom starts singing from a Barbra Streisand song the second time. That was the Yiddish. Did I miss anything?
Not that I'm aware of.
Awesome. No, I sort of rely on you because like I just hear words, like cool words. I know them, like it's fine. But if there's something like you don't know, I definitely want to always ask, like, did I miss something?
I think you got him.
Excellent. So then do you want to take us to our 90s nostalgia?
Yeah, and I'm actually gonna hop ahead of it and go towards the end in this scene where Maxwell is saying, he canceled his plans to talk at the symposium so he can take Brighton to the ball game.
Yep.
Did you see the Game Boy that Brighton was playing? Like that is old school, like very sturdy, heavy duty Game Boy.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, that was the first thing on my list from 90s nostalgia.
Not the Cars?
I mean, that's always on the list. But like this was like an episode, like we always see the Cars. This was like an episode specific thing.
Yeah. So I'll let you go next then, since I stole the Game Boy.
Old Cars. Also, the cell phone that they had at the concert.
Yeah.
It was it looked nothing like today's smartphones.
And you know what? You would imagine that if that were to happen today, they would have her on like FaceTime or something so that she could actually watch.
Right. That's true. Did you have anything else?
We didn't really get into it because but like Maggie's dress that she wore when she kind of made the snide remark to Brighton seemed very 90s to me. It was like
red and velvety.
Red velvet dress, and she also had like a choker on, and the combination just seemed very 90s to me.
No, that's a good point. Did you notice that at the dinner with the family that Maggie and Gracie were both wearing red? I thought that was unusual because usually they don't match. The only other thing I'll toss into our 90s nostalgia section is Cece smoking. Like, do you think that if the show aired today, Cece would be smoking in the bathroom?
Maybe, but again, in general, we don't see as much smoking.
Exactly.
Anymore.
That's what I was thinking, that it seems like oftentimes people are not smoking anymore, which is a good thing, obviously, because smoking is unhealthy, dangerous, etc. But like, I wonder if she would have picked up a different vice.
Yeah, I don't know, because again, I think I could still kind of see it with Cece's character even today. But yeah, I mean, I agree in general, you don't have it as much. So
Okay.
yeah, I mean, I think that's a lot of the 90s stuff. Do you want to give us some future fun?
I would love to. So this is in no particular order. First off, Brighton's baseball phase must be very short-lived, because in season 3, Maxwell really wants Brighton to join a team sport or something. And spoiler, he joins a canasta team, not a baseball team. There's actually a whole thing about how they ended up going to a batting cage and Brighton made contact with the ball, but he didn't hit it with a bat. It was unpleasant for him, as you can imagine.
Sounds painful.
It was. There's so many things. I can't wait till we get to that episode. It's delightful. So this is not the only episode in which Barbra Streisand will feature prominently. In season 4, Fran actually gets to meet Barbra out in the Hamptons. That's on the episode The Car Show, so something to look forward to. So we've already talked about how Cece's parents are divorced. There is an episode where Cece is talking about the benefits of divorced parents, that they compete for your love, and they give you better and better and better gifts, trying to buy you, and how wonderful it is when your parents split up. She has a very different perspective on things than most children. Let's see. This is not the only time that Sylvia will make a comment like, our family, not theirs, when Fran points out that family comes first. So we'll see that again. I find it very strange, as I kind of mentioned before, that Cece is just like going to go up to Maxwell's room and find a better tie for him, because in later episodes, it's sort of clear that she doesn't know the layout of the upstairs and where everybody sleeps, because there's one episode where Fran needs to, I think it's the episode where Fran has to like lay low because she's like persona non grata, because I think it's the episode where she accidentally jinxed the New York Rangers. Whether she did or not is up to interpretation, depending on, anyway. But Cece offers to let Fran stay at her apartment, and Cece will stay in her room, and Cece's like, well, your room's right next to Maxwell's, right? And no, Fran's room's near the kids, so Cece rescinds the offer. So that's one. Another episode, there's an episode where it's almost Maxwell's birthday, and Cece wants to bring him his, tea in the morning, and walks in and finds something she shouldn't find. And like, Niall says to her, you're really not supposed to be in his room, things like that. So it just seemed weird to me that she was like volunteering to go into his bedroom. So there's that. Just on the smoking point, at a later point, Cece does try to stop smoking, and it goes about as well as you can imagine it does. And then finally, kind of we were talking about, well, Fran possibly dating a much older man. She does date a much older man early in season 2. His name is Theodore Timmons, and he looks as old, if not older, than Cece's dad. So yeah.
Interesting.
It is not a long-lived romance. So I think that's it. I'm sure I will have more thoughts as I try to go to sleep tonight, but that'll have to wrap it up for future fun. I think it's time for us to give our ratings of the episode. And, as our wonderful listeners know, we rate every episode on a scale of 1 to 5 lipsticks. And whose
It's
turn
my
is it?
turn.
Oh, thank God. Which I know is my reaction every time it's your turn to go first.
Yeah. So I think I'm gonna give it a solid 4. I think overall, like I didn't really have any major complaints about it. There were some interesting bits. It was interesting to see a new side of Cece, um, as it pertains to her dad. And it was funny, the audio-visual demonstration in the
Yes.
background. Um, but yeah, so I mean, I give it a 4. How about you?
I think I'm also going to give it a 4. I liked this episode. I enjoyed, kind of as you put it, seeing a different side of Cece. I liked the teasing of Cece that she might get a new mummy. I liked that Fran is so vivacious that she makes friends so quickly and easily. Um, I like I like the disparity between Cece not being able to tell her dad that, I want to go with you versus, Brighton, who was very clear that it's no big deal. Don't worry about it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we'll go another time. I like that. I like that Fran was able to, put her desire to go see Barbara aside and, you know, try to patch things over between Cece and her dad.
Mm-hmm.
Which actually, we should probably mention that the guy who played Cece's dad is also very famous.
Mm-hmm.
His name is Robert Culp. Apparently, I believe he died in 2010, according to IMDb. He just, I kind of flipped through like the list of things he was on. He was also on Everybody Loves Raymond. I think he
Oh.
played Deborah's dad.
Oh, okay.
So that was the thing I think I knew him from. But yeah, we should probably mention that he was also a notable New Yorker.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anyway, I like this episode. I think it's fun to watch. Yeah, so I'm also going to give it a 4.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, that's all we have for you today. We hope you had a fine time with us as we revisited The Nanny. Join us next week when we'll be discussing episode 21, Franny's Choice.
If you'd like to reach us on social media, you can find us on Twitter at Nanny Revisited. You can also send us email at afinetimenannyrevisited@gmail.com. Have a great week.